All right, Council, we're back again. It was the Committee of the Whole, and any awards or recognition. All right, go to a confirmation of the agenda. Madam Clerk, to identify any items to add or delete. Madam Clerk.
There are no items to add or delete, Your Worship.
Thank you. Then I'm looking for a mover and seconder that the agenda for the Committee of the Whole meeting held on December 13, 2021 be confirmed and circulated. Moved by Councillor Foster, second by Councillor Lacey. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Anyone have a precarious interest? You can claim it now or when the item comes up. Councillor Lacey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Item CW4-2, with regards to the Community Recreational Improvement Committee, I'm a member of that committee.
Okay, so noted. Anyone else? I'll go to the clerk to identify items for separate discussion and the reason thereof. Oh, sorry, Councillor McClellan.
Thank you, Worship. For CW42, the designation of municipally significant events, I run the Beat and Meet Your Neighbor picnic.
Thanks, Councillor McClellan. I'll go to the clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. The items requiring separate discussion are CW42 2022 designation of municipally significant events, and CS1 verbal report of the CAO recalling Wood to Elliston pipeline and supply of water update. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you. This time I'll go to council to identify items for separate discussion. Councillor McClellan.
Thank you, Worship. CW41 and CW55, please.
Thank you. Councillor Jebb.
Thank you, Worship. CW52, CW54, and CW55's been pulled.
Councillor Foster.
5.5's been pulled, thank you, and 5.7 and 5.8, please.
Councillor Sainsbury.
Thank you, Your Worship. 5.2's been pulled, but I'd like to speak to it in 5.3.
Anyone else? Councillor Harris McIntyre.
Thank you, Worship. 5.2, please.
Thank you. Anyone else? I'll go back to clerk to summarize all items identified for separate discussion. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. CW41 general matters for the 2022 municipal and school board election. CW42 2022 designation of municipally significant events. CW52 site plan agreement amendment 3 Alliston Developments Limited Smart Centers 2022 and 30 Dunham Drive, Town of New Tecumseh. CW53 Bellaterra Estates Development Agreement. CW54 Stop Controlled Intersection Review, Side Road 15th and 9th line, Side Road 15th and 11th line, and Side Road 15th and 13th line. CW55 Municipal Comprehensive Review Update on Mapping of Agricultural and Natural Heritage Systems and Draft Policy Direction on Climate Change and Watershed Planning. CW57 Town Hall Project Status Report number 3. CW58 Banting Homestead Structural Assessment of On-Site Barn. And lastly, CS1, verbal report of the CAO, Collingwood to Alliston pipeline and supply of water update.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. CW5-3. Who pulled, what counselor pulled that? I missed it. Counselor
That was
Sainsbury? Okay,
Councillor
Yes.
Sainsbury.
thank you.
Thank you.
Mover and seconder that all items not identified for separate discussion be received and the recommendation therein be recommended to council for adoption. Mover and seconder, please. Councillor Beatty, Councillor Jebb, all in favor? Carried, thank you. First item is CW41, and I believe it was Councillor McClellan.
Thank you, Worship. There was one thing I wanted to propose to change in this, considering we're still dealing with COVID issues. And reading through it, I noticed that it said that people cannot rent outdoor spaces from the town for any election purposes. And I'm just wondering if we could remove that, only because it seems like COVID's not going away anytime soon. And I believe if candidates choose to rent space from the town, to be safer, they might want to choose to rent outdoor space, as in a park or a baseball field or something. They might feel more comfortable having people outside than having them inside. Due to COVID, as I said, doesn't look like it's going to be going away anytime soon.
Thank you. Go to the clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Staff proposed removing the possibility of renting outdoor space to make it consistent with how we treat our facilities, and that you can only campaign on the inside of the building and not have any campaign material on the outside of the building. But in saying that, this is council's policy to approve. So should council wish to go forward with that, that would be at council's discretion.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor McClellan, did you wish to put a motion on the floor?
That would be my motion, is that we allow candidates to rent outdoor space. If there's a concern with the rest of council of having signs out, we can say no signs, and they can just hand out election material if they so choose. This thought, like I said, came to me from, COVID being inside. Our numbers seem to always go up when we're forced inside, either due to weather or other circumstances. So I just thought that that gave candidates a safer option if that's something that they so choose to do.
Do you have a second? Does a Councillor McClellan have a seconder? I can't get a second, Councillor McClellan.
That's fine.
The motion then reads, the report of Min 2021-39 be received, and further that the use of municipal resources during the election campaign period policy of AC 001-002-018 attached as Schedule A to report of Min 2021-39 be approved. And mover and seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Beatty, second by the Deputy Mayor. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Motion's carried. Thank you. CW4 2. We have two conflicts of interest. I believe it's Councillor McCall and Councillor Lacey. Okay. Look for a mover and second that the report of Min 2021-46 be received And further that the events outlined in attachment 1 to report of Min 2021-46 be approved and designated as events of municipal significance to facilitate organizations and groups in obtaining special occasion permits for provincial liquor license. And further that the clerk, Director of Administration Services or designate be authorized to issue letters of approval with respect to provincial liquor license to the groups and organization as outlined in attachment number 1 to report of Min 2021-46. Mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Foster, second by Councillor Noel. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. C.W.3 and I believe Councillor Harrison McIntyre and Councillor Sainsbury wish to speak on that.
No, I didn't have 4-3, Your Worship.
Okay, Councillor Harrison McIntyre.
The next item, Your Worship, is CW52, Site Plan Agreement Amendment 3, Alliston Developments Limited, Smart Centers.
Councillor Jebb.
Thank you, Your Worship. I request to speak to that on page 2 and 4. It's regarding the urban design guidelines and the cutouts for accessibility. Just if we could ensure that the actual cutouts are actually working for people that need wheelchairs or walkers, because I've had a few people concerned about the buildings that are already there. Their cutouts don't work. So they're nice to look at, but they're not working for people in chairs. So if we could ensure that they test drive their cutouts to make sure that their cutouts are working, I would appreciate it.
Director Battery.
Through your worship to Councillor Jebb, we will reach out to the developer and ensure that their curb cuts do meet all accessibility requirements. And I'm not quite sure if we can test drive them, but we'll definitely make sure they meet the requirements.
I can find somebody to test drive for them if they want.
All right. Motion moved by Councillor Jebb and second by
I pulled that one.
Sorry, Your Worship. There was 2 other members of council that also wanted to speak to the motion.
oh, that's where I got mixed up on the other one. Councillor Sainsbury.
Thank you, Your Worship. When we have the haul route and they're taking materials in and out of the smart centers, the first road they'll come to off of 89 will be across from the driveway into Tim Hortons. And I think when they're hauling the fill or materials or whatever in and out, they're going to need a flag person there. Even when we're not doing construction, you can't get across that road to get out into the lane to go east on 89. So when days they're doing it, they need to consider having someone there to direct traffic, because they just come around the corner off 89 and they stop dead to turn left into Tim Hortons driveway or to turn right to go to the Dollarama Plaza.
Okay,
So
thank you.
it could create, and the second thing I have is if we could check, I know we don't have any fencing along that area, but what's going to happen if it's an LCBO? Is they're going to park on the edge of Highway 89 just by Country Depot and dash into the liquor store? So I really think it needs a wrought iron fence for a distance towards what's the first thing? A&W. Because otherwise I think you're going to find that they're not going to drive in, they're just going to run across the boulevard.
Thank you.
Like they do now at Tim Hortons.
Councillor Harrison McIntyre.
Thank you, Worship. I was just going to speak to the provided picture of what they're planning on building, and again, just kind of reiterate other comments that I've said in the past, which is this is a good start. You know, it's a starting point, but I think that they could do better. It's a pretty generic, uninspired design, and I recommend that they try and supply us with something that would fit in with more with the historic nature of Alliston and our community. So more brick, more awnings. You know, you see a lot of the LCBOs, they have nice awnings on them and that sort of thing. This could be a Starbucks. This could be, you know, this could be any building. It's not very distinctive. So I would ask them to do something a little bit more tasteful.
Thank you. Anyone else? Have a motion moved by Councillor Jebb, second by Councillor Harrison McIntyre, that report of Bing 2021-47 be received, and further that a bylaw be enacted and authorize the mayor and clerk to enter into a site plan agreement with Alliston Developments Limited to facilitate the construction of a commercial development located at 22 and 30 Dunham Drive in the community of Alliston, subsequently in the form of attachment number 4 to report of Bing 2021-47, all subject to the town solicitor's clearance. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. C.W.3 Councillor Sainsbury.
Thank you, Your Worship. I was through you to Director Battery. When they restore this road from Highway 89 past the 14th line to the curve in the road, I can't tell from the drawing, does it go as far as the east gates into Greenbrier?
Director
Because we have
Battery?
deep ditches, deep ditches and a huge culvert there. Sometimes it blocks and
Director
freezes from
Battery?
spring.
Through your worship to Councillor Sainsbury, the first stage that this agreement it deals with is from where they finished work at Highway 89 intersection to 240 meters south of the Greenbrier Hill, or I'm sorry, the Treetops entranceway. The balance of the works will be done at a future date, and yes, they will. This section of roadway will go past the entranceway into the Greenbrier Greenbrier residential development.
And would at that time, through you, Your Worship, supplementary, would at that time we look at that box culvert or whatever type of culvert it is that comes out onto the road just a little bit to the north of the gates into Greenbrier, because sometimes that plugs up in winter and spring we have backup and flooding. So it could be part of the total road project to correct as we're going.
Director Battery.
Through your worship to Councillor Sainsbury, I'm not quite sure which culvert you're speaking to. Perhaps if an opportunity presents, we could have a look at the drawings and I could show you what they're planning for the next phase. And that may answer the question that way, if you don't mind.
Yeah, and Director Horan is aware of the culvert, so he could tell you exactly which one I mean.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
A motion then moved by Councillor Sainsbury and second by Councillor Jebb, that further that a bylaw be enacted to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute a development agreement with 2038148 Ontario Inc., Cable Bridge Enterprise Limited, to facilitate the construction and urbanization of a Side Road 10, Stage 1 in the community of Alliston, subsequently in the form of attachment number 2 to report of Bing 2020-48, subject to the town solicitor's clearance. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next one's Councillor Jebb, CW54.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Director Vatry. Thank you for the report. I would, on the side road 15 and the 11th line, where currently it's a 75 by 75 stop sign, and where the recommendation is to replace the stop ahead with a 90 by 90 stop ahead sign. I was wondering, can we change the stop sign eastbound to the 90-90? Because like the people flying through there, I don't know if a larger stop ahead sign is going to stop them. I'm wondering if we should go ahead, bite the bullet and put the bigger stop sign on the eastbound along with the stop ahead. Does that make sense?
Director Vatry.
Through your worship to Councillor Jebb, staff have recommended changes in keeping with the OTM manuals. If council directs that a larger stop sign goes in there, we could do that work, absolutely. It'd be council's discretion. However, staff from the technical perspective have identified that the stop signs there that are currently there meet the minimum requirements.
I would like to,
Councillor Jebb.
yeah, thank you, Worship. I would like to see us replace the stop signs with the bigger ones, just to make it more visible. The next thing would be one of, what do you call those, nail belt things, speed belt things?
All right, I'll go to the clerk to read the new motion.
So the amendment would be, and further that the stop sign eastbound at the 15th and 11th line be increased to 90 by 90 centimeters.
Moved by Councillor Jebb and second by Councillor Foster. Any questions? All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Yes,
Sorry, Your Worship. We just have to go back because the main motion was amended. So if you want, I can read it out.
please.
And we can ask for a mover and seconder.
Okay.
So that report ENG 2021-49 be received, and further that staff be directed to implement improvements as recommended in report ENG 2021-49, and further that the stop sign size eastbound on the 15th and 11th line be increased to 90 by 90 centimeters.
Moved by Councillor Jebb and second by Councillor Foster. Moved by Councillor Jebb, second by Councillor Foster. Any further discussion? All in favor? Motion's carried. Thank you. Next one is Councillor McClellan and Councillor Jebb, CW5. Councillor McClellan.
Thank you, Worship. In looking at the areas that the province wants to remove from the natural heritage system, I'd like to see, and I'll put the motion on the floor, I'd like to see this council ask the province, I guess through the county, that northwest part of Beaton, or just outside the settlement area of Beaton, stay in the natural heritage system. That's the side of town that our creek runs through. It floods. I understand the province does a very high level overview where they put this information into an algorithm and it sort of spits out whether it should be in or it shouldn't be in. And I doubt they've been there. I doubt they've had eyes on. And I think especially the west side of Beaton, that's where so many of the developments put their stormwater into the creek. It's a very important area, and I'd like to see us request that they keep that in the natural heritage system. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Jebb. Before I put the motion on the floor.
Oh, Your Worship, I was going to ask about the agriculture, if you want to deal with this first.
Well, no, we'll deal with the motion first. And then we'll go back to you for the agriculture.
Yeah,
Councillor
thank you.
Sainsbury.
Thank you, Your Worship. The motion on the floor, are these lands also going to be part of and spoken to in the master drainage plan that we're waiting to be finalized? I think we're in phase 2. So once we know what that has to say, then
Director
we can
Best.
have it after that report.
Through you, Mayor Milne, to Councillor Sainsbury. The two two systems are not connected with regards to, this is the provincial natural heritage system, so it's not connected to the town's master drainage plan. This is looking at protection of features such as watercourse, woodlands, wetlands, and that sort of thing.
But I guess supplementary, that's the area, is it being reviewed and studied by the drainage plan as well because of the high water table?
Director Best.
I would defer through you, Mayor Milne, to Director Vatry on this drainage master plan. I would defer it to him. Thank you.
Director Vatry.
For your worship, to Councillor Sainsbury. The first phase of the master drainage plan did identify the areas that were susceptible to flooding. And I believe you're correct. This is an area that was identified with respect to that, with respect to flooding. So again, it is part of our study area.
So that would be taken in when they decide to map all this as well.
Do I have a seconder for the motion? Deputy Mayor, any questions, any further discussions on the motion? All in favor? Motion's carried. Councillor Jebb.
Thank you, Worship. We had a very good meeting this afternoon regarding this and the agricultural community. I just would ask somehow through Director Best that she keep pushing the county to dialogue with our farming community where these areas, they will be affected. Unfortunately, Simcoe County Federation of Agriculture doesn't have a rep on the board from New Tecumseh. So a lot of the farmers don't get a whole lot of the information from New Tecumseh. They don't get a lot of information. So I just asked Director Best to ensure that the county keep sending dialogue out to our farmers that will be affected by this. Thank you.
Director Best.
Through you, Mayor Milne, to Councillor Jebb. I will continue to do that, and I know that at the agricultural public session there was a rep from the Ontario Federation of Agriculture. I don't know if it was the one for our area or not, but there was some participation from the agricultural community, but they didn't identify them if they were from New Tecumseh or not. So I will make that note to the county in my notes.
Thank you very much. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor Milne. Through you to Director Best. I'm looking at page 3 of the report. It says something I find a bit interesting. It refers to the introduction of the provincial agricultural systems. And it says one of the components of the county's municipal comprehensive review is a review of the location of the prime agricultural lands in the county. That's how it starts. Then it ends by saying, where a settlement boundary expansion is proposed, the growth plan permits expansion on the agricultural designated lands. So I just want to understand, as a layman, I read that and I think, okay, it sounds good. And then at the end, I think, oh, well, everything that sounded good, they can just expand the settlement boundary. So without me prognosticating on what that means, could you kindly explain to me what the interpretation of that is?
Director Best.
Through Mayor Milne to Councillor Foster. Yes, it doesn't always match up, I will say clearly. So the introduction of the provincial agricultural system looked at lands from a perspective of the provincial LEAR, which is a land evaluation area review, which is soil classification, climatic considerations, fragmentation, conflicting land uses. They did not look at it from a growth management standpoint. So in the report, I wanted to inform council that although the province is looking at establishing a provincial agricultural system, and they used our official plan mapping as a base, it doesn't preclude the fact that some agricultural lands may have to be removed as part of any settlement boundary expansion. So I wanted to be clear to council, although there's additions, there's a strong possibility of removals too, and the two are not always compatible.
Parliamentary, Councillor Foster.
Thank you kindly. If I were to ask the question is if the province designated at its prime agricultural land and we decided we want a settlement boundary expansion, who wins?
Through the mayor to yourself, Councillor Foster, the settlement boundary expansion wins.
Okay, thank you kindly.
Councillor Jebb.
Just a quick question, and maybe Director Best can just forward on. Part of the criteria, do they look at farmland that requires water taking permits for irrigation?
Director Best.
Through Mayor Milne to Councillor Jebb, is this in regards to establishing the provincial agricultural system or as part of a settlement boundary expansion?
Both.
To answer your question, my understanding is that they don't look at water taking permits, that's not a factor as part of establishing the agricultural system mapping. And as part of a settlement boundary expansion, it would be something that perhaps the town would want to investigate more with regards to what's happening on the land as part of this, the criteria.
Thank you. Anybody else? Then I have a motion moved by Councillor McClellan, second by Councillor Jebb, that report of PD 2021-61 be received, and further that report of PD 2021-61 be forwarded along with notes on discussion to the County of Simcoe to represent the Town of New Tecumseh's comments on the County of Simcoe's proposed mapping changes to the agricultural system and natural heritage system, in addition to proposed policy direction on climate change and watershed planning. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. Next one, CW57, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor Milne. Through you to Director Burton. Director Burton, thank you for the continued reports on the admin center. I just draw your attention to the page 2 of your report, and it says, you're referring to potential risks to schedule, which are still a great concern as we continue to finalize shop drawing approvals, supply chain issues, and labor shortages. As these concerns are identified and brought forward, the team is continually reviewing to find the best way to mitigate any overall schedule delays. I have a couple questions in there. Is Matheson tied to a specific date for substantial completion and occupancy? And if they do not achieve that date, are there any penalties, financial or otherwise, to Matheson Construction?
Burton.
Through you, Mayor Milne, to Councillor Foster. Yes, there is a date in which a substantial performance is to be achieved within the contract documents. There is, however, no liquidated damages included in this contract agreement.
Second question.
Supplementary. This will probably turn into a couple or three. So if there is a date that you're tied to and there's no financial penalties, what are our repercussions if they don't meet those dates?
Director Burton.
Through you, Mayor Milne, to Councillor Foster. Our remedy in place for this project is simply schedule management and continual adherence to the schedule in terms of review and managing progress and managing the vendor throughout the transaction. Typically, this type of project, if you put in penalty clauses, you have to be willing to put in bonusing clauses for the opposite, for them to be delivered in a faster timeline, which typically isn't done in a municipal setting. So we don't promote putting in liquidated damages without the other. So that's why there is nothing on this contract.
Supplementary, Councillor Foster.
One last question. Related to COVID-19 or other things, what contractual protection does Matheson have for not meeting schedules? Like, do they have clauses in there that deal specifically with the supply chain issues or availability of materials or labor shortages or COVID-19? Do they have any built-in, let's call them weasel clauses, call them whatever you want, to get out of, to give them a free pass on scheduling?
Dr. Burton.
Through you, Mayor Milne, to Councillor Foster. Without the specific contract in front of me at the moment, I would suggest there is no weasel clauses, if you will, that are in place for them to alleviate them from schedule concerns as it related to supply chain issues. It's typically a negotiated element when it does come up.
Yeah, thank you, kindly.
Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Your Worship. Through you to Director Burton, just going to touch on the same paragraph briefly that Councillor Foster was referring to, especially the long time leads for equipment. Has there been discussion going on right now that there's going to be anticipation of material costs dramatically increasing? Are you having those discussions? Because in my industry, what I've noticed is that you're right, there is a shortage, specifically in certain materials and equipment. And what's happening is that's driving the price incrementally. I'm talking 10 to 20% further up, and it's basically coming down to who can afford to pay more to get their hands on what equipment. So, are you have anticipation of these costs being rising up through labor and material, or do you think we're still okay and we're on the right trajectory with that?
Dr. Burton.
Through you, Mayor Milne, to Deputy Mayor Norcross. We are continually having discussions at the time of shop drawing production to ensure that there is a timely reply to ensure pricing validity and schedules are not delayed and impacted. For a perfect example, our RTU units for the project were a critical path item, and we had to turn around our shop drawing approvals within 2 days to ensure that we were able to meet both price and schedule and maintain those. So that's a continual process that's occurring on the project with the project team. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Your Worship.
Motion then moved by Councillor Phosphorus, second by Deputy Mayor. The report of PRC 2021 be received. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Next is CW5, Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Mayor Milne. This is more just a comment. I know that Director Burton in his report said there's going to be a more exhaustive report, but I hope that as these reports come in, we all keep in mind the importance of rapidly diminishing historically significant buildings in not just New Tecumseth, but all over Ontario and the world. So I hope as this report comes in, and I hope there is some positive news for that barn, because I think it would just be a crying shame to see it be demolished and just a memorial left there for it. So it was more just a comment. Thank you.
Thank you. I have a motion moved by Councillor Foster, second by Councillor Beattie, that further to the correspondence from Sir Frederick Banting Legacy Foundation dated December 8, 2021, attached to report of PRC 2021-24 is attachment to be received. All in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you. At this time, the Committee of the Whole will go into a closed session. The verbal report from the CAO, Rita Collingwood, to the Allison Pipeline Supply of Water Update. Mover and seconder. Moved by Councillor Jebb, second by Councillor McClellan, and the time is 8:40 p.m.